Hello, I'm Sarah, this is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. And this is where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a great reading week, some ups and downs, and I'll talk about that, including a very bizarre thing that happened with DNFs this week that I only really put together, contextualized as I was thinking through what I wanted to talk about today. So stay tuned for the end for that. But let's jump right in. So I spoke last week about reading this. This is Middle England, and this is by Jonathan Coe. This is one of those atrocious, huge copies that you get at the London Heathrow Airport. This was a half buy one get one half off, which I can't stop. I'm so addicted to those. This was my first Jonathan Coe. It will not be my last. I didn't realize this is the third of his Rotters Club series. And I'd heard about the Rotters Club, I'd heard of Jonathan Coe, but I didn't put it together that this was a continuation, and it's not really anywhere on this lovely cover. So this is quite an interesting, quite a very good feat of writing, in my opinion. What we have here is an examination into the lives of Middle England, different classes, but fundamentally white British people in the middle of England, and some London kind of thrown in there. And the time period is leading into, during, and the immediate after effect of the Brexit vote. What I like about this book is that it's very smartly crafted and oriented in the people. So we have a group of people that are at the core of this, and they're tangentially related to each other through acquaintance, through growing up together, through marriage, dating, that type of thing. And we see them, we see the attitudes, we see the things that, the rising antagonism of the propaganda that's starting to take hold around Brexit. And there's a really funny thing where a politician who works in government is talking to a friend of his that he's known for many, many years. And the term Brexit just came out, but he keeps calling it, the man who works in government keeps calling it Brexit, as in Britain exits, Brexit. And his friend, who's just like a normal Joe, says, no, you mean Brexit. As in Britain exits. and they're trying to figure out which one it is, which is quite amusing. But it just shows how not really well thought out this was, and how motivated by emotion and the propaganda about kind of Britain first and safety and the confusion around what did it mean, and more importantly, not just confusion, but not understanding the ramifications of what it will mean in the future. I thought that was very clever, and it made me want to go back and read volumes 1 and 2 of the Rotters Club, because you could tell that these are probably people that grew up together, and we get to see the journey all the way through. So yes, this was really good. It surprised me. I thought it was going to be okay, but it was much better than I expected, and very simply told. You know, it's rooted in character, and it's rooted in the sense of place of what's happening in the contemporary moment. So yeah, really happy that I got this. Then next up, this kept appearing on all sorts of best of lists. And I don't always like the best of lists, but I saw this in Book of the Month Club. I heard Oxford, I heard languages and translation, and I thought, okay, well, let me give it a shot. And then when I heard colonialism tagged onto it, I thought, well, now I'm definitely getting it. This is Babel by Rf Quan, and the title is actually really much longer. It's Babel, or the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. This is a phenomenal work. Yeah, wow. Just wow. I'm trying to think about how to encapsulate it without making it seem too simplistic, because it's a dense work. It's rich. It's got a lot in here. So it's fantasy, but the fantasy is, I would say, secondary to the point of view of the setting and purpose. So similarly to how Dune has a magic system of, spice, and spice is the commerce that propels this universe that Dune is created in. Dune being the famous science fiction masterpiece by the author I can't remember right now. I'll put his name in the information below. This similarly has a magical element that is commerce-based and propels the expansion of the British Empire. So this is set in 1828, and so it's Victorian times, and it's very steeped in Victoriana. It's steeped in what the world was like at that moment. And we open in China, in Canton, where there is a cholera epidemic breaking out, and we meet our main character. Our main character is Robin, and we meet him as his mother is dying of cholera, and a man comes in and whisks him away from all of that. And by whisking him away, he takes him to England and begins a formal training of him. And the reason he does this is because our character Robin, his name is then changed very quickly to be European, a European name. Robin Swift is what he chose. Robin is exceptionally gifted in language and being able to speak languages, understand languages, diction, his pronunciation, his comprehension, even for a young boy, is exceptional. It becomes very clear that Professor Lovell, who has taken him under his wing, is not a kind man. He's not a gentleman. He is, so you have Dickens feel, right? The orphan origin story, someone who's kind of exploiting these children, and, instead of a sweatshop, it's scholarly work. And there's a tension in between the two of them. But Robin is quiet. He's introverted. He wants to do well, and he kind of takes what's given to him because he doesn't know any better. So he is eventually trained up enough to go to Oxford, and he's given a place in Oxford. Now, many of you may know and have heard me say how much I love Oxford. I am not ignorant to the challenges of Oxford, so that's why this was a really good book for me to read, because there was enough sense of place, but also a examination of Oxford and the way it turns out leaders. And leaders perpetuating a specific type of leadership. And in going to Oxford, he meets the first friends he's ever had, and they're people like him. His friend Rami, and Rami is a young boy from Calcutta, raised in very similar circumstances. He also meets Victoire, and Victoire is a ex-Haitian slave, and she and Letty are housed in similar conditions off-site because they're women and they have to be kept separate. Letty, though, is a young girl of privilege, but being a woman really reduces her ability to have access. And she and Victoire try to go to all sorts of lengths to kind of get around those challenges, including cross-dressing, so that they can kind of sneak into the places that they're not allowed to be and yet need to be in order to do their work and study. So these scholars all kind of enter the Oxford years, and it becomes like this very dark academia book, very focused on the act of studying and the stress and the new relationships and the tensions with other more elite people in school, all of those things, including a really interesting party that Robin is invited to that took me back to Brideshead Revisited and kind of turned that narrative on its head in a way that I got so excited. So this book really is, at this stage, we're in college experience, that freedom that these kids have just finally felt. And then something happens where Robin sees someone who not just looks like him because he's Chinese, but looks exactly like him. It's like his doppelganger. And he realizes that there's something happening that he is completely unaware of. And he gets kind of sucked into something with a group that he goes into willingly without knowing, not thinking it through, because he's so desperate for any kind of familial bonds. And that leads to all sorts of things. I'm going to stop there. There's so much more I could say about this book. So much more I could say about it. The way it's written is very, I mentioned, very Victoriana. She puts footnotes in, and I just love footnotes in fiction. I just find that to be fascinating. And it's important here because it's very clear that the author studies linguistics and knows about the history and can point to things that are anachronistic and things that are maybe facts that are not just interesting but relevant to the position that she's taking, which is the exploitation and evils of colonialism and how it manifests and abused so many people in the world and created an imbalance that is very difficult for people to overcome. And she does it through the eyes of the people who are othered. And so they are our narrators, they're our protagonists. And I think it's so smart, so smart. The whole thing is smart. It is finely crafted, very thoughtfully executed. It's my first Rf Quan. It will not be my last. I really hope that there is a continuation of this. I saw an opportunity for that in the end. So we'll see. I read this with Leo of Leo's Little Book Life on Instagram, and we both just raved about it. Reading this with somebody else, I think, gave me so much more richness. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to think about. And yeah, I thought it was absolutely sublime. Then I needed something lighter. I needed a different frame, and I came across this that was available in audio form from my public library system, and I said, sure. And this is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. Paris Apartment, you had me at Paris, and I dove right in. Now I would say there is a ton of people that are on this audio that do the narration. So Clare, Corbett, Daphne, Kouma, Julia, Winwood, Sophie, Dirisu, Sofia, Zervudachi, and Charlie Anson. So it's a big cast of characters that are narrating this book. It's set in a building in Paris, and our premise is we have Jess, who's in her 20s. She's a young woman who's been bartending, kind of sliding around life, hasn't really found her place, and has really been hampered by a difficult upbringing. She was in care, in the foster care system, the care system in the UK, and she has a half-brother, Ben. Finds herself in trouble, has to leave the UK real fast because of something that she did, and leaves a message for Ben, her half-brother, who is living in Paris in this apartment. Ben sends her a message and said, okay, well, here's where my address is. Just ring the bell when you get here. She kept trying to respond to him about when she's coming. Maybe he hasn't, maybe he can send her a car, meet her someplace. She doesn't know her way around Paris. She ends up stumbling and having, because she has no money, so she's walking through and finally arrives at this apartment and has difficulty getting in, and Ben is not answering his phone. And that is kind of the beginning of what ends up being a missing person mystery of what happened to Ben, because he's missing from his apartment. And he's been doing an investigation, and this apartment, somehow the people in this apartment fit in a specific way, and she has to figure all of this out and pull all of the threads together into something that makes sense. She doesn't know who to trust, doesn't know who his friends or foes are, and also doesn't really know a lot about her half-brother. So it was a creepy book. It had like that thriller, chasey, someone's watching you vibe, which I actually don't like. But it was light enough and maybe campy enough, maybe, that I could go for it. And it didn't sit in that space too long. It was more of a plot driver to get you to the next chapter. Characters were really weak. There's plot holes like Swiss cheese in this thing, but it was a fun romp. It was a little silly, a lot over the top, some histrionics that made me laugh. I would say this would be a perfect book if you're like wanting something on your way, like on an airplane, and you need something to kind of keep you occupied, either in audio form or in the written page. So I gave it a 3. It was nothing to write home about, but for me, it was a good palate cleanser of exactly what I was looking for. Now let's talk about that strange realm of admire but didn't like. And so I hope you've experienced that in your reading. This is a book that I read for my In Real Life book club. This is The Trees by Percival Everett. This is a book that I am very happy exists. This is a book that I feel is important. This is a book that I think is needed. This is a book that I think has value, but I didn't get on with it, though I understand all of those aspects. So let's talk a little bit more. This is a satire/horror book, 2 genres which I absolutely do not get on with at all. But it's about it's almost a revenge tale of white men in the South being murdered. Starts in the South, then grows. And at the scene of their murder, another body is found, and it's always a black man, and that black man is always holding something. I will not say what it is so that you all can read it in the book. And it becomes the white men are easily identified, quickly identified. The black men are always hard to figure out who this is and why did this happen. So it's a police procedural with horror elements, with satirical aspects. You know, there's some cops that come down to the South in order to investigate this, and they come across the very racist police force. All of the stereotypes about Southern racist rednecks is all front and center. He's playing with those. He's playing with those tropes and stereotypes and all of that. And really, really well. I mean, this is one of those books that you'll laugh a little bit, but you also feel bad about laughing, which is incredible. That is what should happen. You shouldn't get comfortable in this book. You shouldn't be reading this book and saying, I mean, yeah, at a certain point you're like, yes, 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 you know, championing some of the actions here, but at the same time, some of the stuff that's more funny and pokes fun at is the stuff that's really horrific and speaks to the horror of the current state of racial relations in the United States. So this was a provocative book. I felt provoked. He got me. I felt all of it. And so in that sense, I think it's incredibly valuable. I think I'm so glad the Booker committee actually chose this into the shortlist, which is why it even came on my radar, because otherwise I would have said no satire, no horror, absolutely not. Glad I read it, but will not revisit this one but we'll be thinking about it for quite a long time. Okay, so that's what I read. Now let's talk about what I'm currently reading. So continuing on with my group read, we're reading the Fortunes of War Saga. This is the Levant trilogy. The group I'm reading with is so brilliant, and we're having so much fun reading this. There's so much to discuss, to think about in terms of what she's putting in, what she's leaving out, the characters, the setting, the style, the craft. This is like, she's like the perfect group read subject because she's giving us so much and leading us to so many great conversations. So that's going phenomenally. Then I started, this is my personal project. I'm going to be reading Emile Zola's Rougons series, and I'm reading the first one, The Fortune of the Rougons. Emile Zola. This is translated by Brian Nelson, and this is the Oxford University Press World Classics edition. Enjoying this very much. Also doing the audiobook of this. This is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. Really interesting so far. It's a Caribbean origin story about a family. We have different points of view and different time horizons, all centering around a mother's death, which calls home family members, to which a recording is being played of her admitting things about her past that her family never knew about. So it's her reckoning and coming to terms with identifying who she is and being seen. Powerful. There's a lot here. So far, so good. Then I'm going to be starting something that I'm going to be doing with Leo of Leo's Little Book Life. We're going to be reading some of Henry James's work. We were intrigued after Washington Square, Hana Yanagihara's book, and we went and read Washington Square. And it just seems like Henry James is a writer that we'd like to understand a little bit more. And again, perfect writer for a buddy read. So we're going to read Daisy Miller, which is one of the thinnest little novellas. Now let me talk about my DNFs. This is so weird, y'all. So I talked about this last week, and I said I was going to try to push through. I realized absolutely not. I'm not pushing through this. This is Three Streets by Yoko Tawadawa, and this is translated by Margaret Mitsutani. Beautiful, beautiful editions these are. I mentioned before that this really reinforced my fears and anxiety around short stories. If they're weird, if they're surreal, I just don't get on with them. And I tried to go back in and read some of the other stories in here, and I just thought, no, this is not working out for me. So this was Three Streets. Then I started reading a book that I got on NetGalley, gifted by the publisher, from Valérie Perrine, and it's her book 3. And I wanted access to it because I adored this one. This is Fresh Water for Flowers. I got this in Paris, and it was phenomenal. I thought it was so wonderful. The story of an older woman looking back on her life, and she manages a cemetery outside in a small little village, and has all of these interesting people around her and an interesting philosophy of life. So I thought, oh, I want to read more by her. But I ended up giving up on 3, which is the story of, it's a coming of age story, but we're looking back in retrospect. Something happened. So it's a kind of a mystery story. And we have these friends that grew up together. And it just, what worked in this is not working in the other, which this unveiled itself very slowly. But it was interesting at every phase. With 3, I'm not captivated. I'm not interested. I'm not enjoying the characters. So it makes it so that the unveiling is taking too damn long to happen. And I thought, I can't do this. So DNF that one. Then the last one that I DNF'd, I don't even have, I'll have to put a photo here because I showed it, but I ended up selling it back to a used bookstore, and that is 3 Summers. Are you getting a theme here? 3 books with the word 3 that I could not get on with, any one of them. 3 Summers is a book by Margherita Liberace, and it's a world classic. It was written in the 40s, and Greek woman writer, and I was reading it with my In Real Life book club, and I had to tell them, I was like, I'm starting to go into a slump, and it was because I had all of these books that were really not working for me. There was nothing particularly wrong about 3 Summers. I just wasn't connected to the characters. And it was that we're moving fast through these characters. We had a lot of history. It was a young family told through the story of a girl, the youngest sister, 3 sisters, 3 Summers, and all of the people around them, and all the boys coming in and out. And I just didn't care. The writing didn't inspire me. The characters didn't inspire me to want to go on this journey. And there was a hint of a mystery that I got excited about. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's going to come into play, but it didn't. A missing grandmother who seemed very interesting. She seemed like she was the one who actually escaped and found a phenomenal life. And everybody else is just kind of living, just passing the days. And I got to the point where even my husband said, "Are you okay? You know, it doesn't seem like you're doing okay." And I realized that I was starting to fall into a reading slump. And so I texted my girlfriends and said, "Absolutely not. I'm struggling. I don't know if I'm going to finish this." And it turns out same for them. So we are very happy that all of us said, no, please no, don't make us finish this. So that is what I accomplished and have on deck for next week. I would love to know, have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? And as usual, I hope you have a fantastic reading week, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Okay, bye.